No minyanim tonight? What's going on? No one went to daven with a minyan tonight?
We got a minion with plug.
Oh, that's smart. So you wouldn't miss me.
Plug.
That's great. I've been doing that anyway these days because
That's correct.
Anyway, I never doubt. You have. I see Krishna over at night anyway, so it doesn't make much of a difference. That's great. So how did it go? The 10? You had 13 people. How many did you have? Uri, how many did you have?
We had
11.
10 or 11.
11.
We had 10. 10 tonight because one was in class, couldn't make it. One was another one couldn't make it, and the third one needs to call you with a shiloh.
Okay. So, but you had a minion. So did you have a minion or not?
We had a minion.
Okay. Did it feel
Yes,
good?
we had 10 made it out of the 13.
Did it feel good to daven with a minion?
It was. I almost said Kel Melech Naman.
Did you cry?
I had to stop myself from saying Kel Melech Naman. It was very, very special.
All right. Meanwhile, I'm still.
I can't say I did. No, unfortunately not.
Did you hear it?
Okay, I think it's 8:10. The Chizuk is we always schedule to Mincha Ma'ariv when there was no minyanim. Now there's minyanim, so everyone's busy davening and they won't be able to come on the Chizuk. So that's a little sad, but the loyal ones know the Chizuk is more important than daven with Philip Tzibur, right? Me and Bernie were on the same page on that one. Okay. Anyway, they said not let it go. They said if you're over 60, 65 for sure, just stay home and don't expose yourself and all that. Okay. So tonight is, tomorrow, I just want to remind everyone, the famous, I mentioned it last night, the Tfilas HaShalah, famous HaShalah, you can usually download it. It's the Tfilas HaShalah. And it's supposed to be said it's a special prayer that's said on behalf of our children. Beautiful, beautiful words, just to study the words where he parallels the mitzvah of having children, Puravu, and Lamadatem, my son is Benechem, says the two sides of the same coin. The only reason why Hashem gave us children is that we could perpetuate the message of Torah. And that's really what it's all about, and that's what we hope to do. You don't have to have necessarily biological children. You can be a conveyor of the Messiah to other people's children. There's a concept of Kol Lamet, Ben Torah, Kilu, Kibul Torah, Har Sinai. We're all engaged, but ideally that's the model. We hear and we have generations so that we can perpetuate the mission of Torah. So tonight is, in the sphere we're going to say, is Malchus Shebi Yesod. And Yesod is Yosef. So who's the Malchus Shebi Yesod? In Kabbalah, or Chassidus, however you want to call it, the Rachli Meinu is the Midah of Malchus. Midah Malchus. And the way I saw Rav Shimshon Pincus as Malchus, a Melech, contrary to what the world thinks, the Melech, everyone serves him and he gets everything. In the vernacular of a Chazal, the Melech has no need for anything. He's just there to give. And the Midah Malchus, and that's what it talks about, the moon is also called the Midah Malchus because the moon has no self. It just simply reflects the rays of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the rays of the sun, the power of the sun, and reflects it back. I use this so many times, the perfectly polished mirror that just radiates back the Ratzon Hashem, and there's no sense of self at all. That's the Midah of Malchus. So Malchus Shebi Yesod means that behind every successful Jewish man is a Jewish mother. That's what it's about. It's a Jewish mother. And that's true because think of it. If there's anyone who symbolizes this concept of Malchus, where I'm just a giver, a Melech is Leiv Ha'am. That's what Rambam says. It's not for himself. It's not ingratiation. That's not a Melech Yisrael. Melech doesn't need anything. He's here to take whatever resources he has and serve the people. That's what it's all about. A mother is Malchus. That's what a mother is. A mother has no sense of self, totally selfless, gives of herself to have a child. And it was Rachli Meinu who obviously proved for all of time the selflessness that she had. She gave up her whole destiny. She didn't know how it would turn out. She was willing to give up the intention to marry Yaakov, so you should take Leah, to save Leah from Esav, and whatever the consequence would be. So Rachel Meinu represents Malchus, and that's the one who cries for her children. It's Mavak al Baneha. She cries for her children, and she yearns and waits until the real Malchus will restore, and she will bring that midah of Malchus in the world that will then come through Malchus Beis David, even though they don't descend from her. But the prelude to Malchus David is the Mashiach ben Yosef. So at any rate, Malchus Yesod, the message for tonight is, behind every successful Jewish man is a Jewish mother, and that's not stam. Doesn't mean because she's willing to. Hi, Dovi. It's not just that she brings life, but her prayers, her tefillas, and that's why Rachel made it for all of history is the mother that cries for her children. So I want to share with you two things about, because tomorrow's Vatzah, I think it's also appropriate to talk about it, because today everyone's focused on going back to davening and minyanim, and tefillah b'tzibur, and of course it's Meredith, and of course we should do it only. I'm sure you read my letter and you sensed a certain hesitation that I had, but if it works, just it should work. That's all. It should be done properly, and the others who can't do it should not feel any guilt. But let's not lose the something we've gained during this time is the intimacy of tefillah, the intimacy of our relation with Hashem. And sometimes when it's in a tzibur, you forget that. But realize that at the end of the day, it's when you and God alone. And I want to tell you two amazing things that I came across. One I came across this morning, one I came across early in the week I wanted to share. So first of all, Rabbi Michli Hudalefkos, he was famous, one of the Gedolim that lived in this recent generation. He was a wonderful man, one of the nicest human beings on earth, a tzaddik, he radiated mamash shechina of everything he did. He was so selfless. And he used to observe, he was Rosh Yeshiva for many years. And he said very often he would see, he had students in his yeshiva. He lived to be close to 100, if not more. And he was pretty vital till the end. He had generations. He had grandparents, children, grandchildren, and maybe even great-grandchildren that he taught several generations. He noticed over the years that sometimes the families that had several children, and one was the naturally weaker one, it was the weaker one that became the most successful. He observed this time and again. This was like a lifetime, talking about 80, 90 years of Avodas HaKodesh, observing, and young children. He was high school age children, what they call Shivatana. And he explained it, and the reason is, it's an amazing thing when you think about it, because for the shvacha children, the good children we take for granted. But for the shvacha children, the mothers cry, they cry at the candle lighting. And those tears were the power that gave these weaker children, not only that the tefillos were answered, but they rose way above. And he observed this for decades, generations. It's an amazing, amazing thing. There was another story, I spoke about the Pnei Menachem. Again, I advise everyone to read the book, and I'm sure you'll be inspired. And he was Rosh Yeshiva in Sfas Emes, and there was once an outstanding Talmud whose father came to visit the yeshiva. And when the father came to Rosh Yeshiva, he said, Rosh Yeshiva, tell me a little bit about my son. And he said, yeah, Baruch Hashem, ganz fine, hakol b'seida, he said. That's all he said. So okay. He was expecting, accolades and superlatives. And afterwards, he went, the Rosh Yeshiva went to his office, and he went to speak to Rabbi. And Rabbi were glowing about their son, and they couldn't understand, he couldn't understand it. Everyone's telling me my son is like, God's gift to humanity. And I go to the Rebbe, and he said, Baruch Hashem, hakol b'seida. So he goes to the Rebbe. He says, Rebbe, Zugme, something's wrong. You were so parav in your. So he said like this. He said, I'm going to tell you a story. A story that happened with him. The Pnei Menachem was the son of the Imrei Emes. The Imrei Emes was the son, I believe, of the Sfas Emes. And the Sfas Emes had a son, the Imrei Emes. The Imrei Emes was the father of the Beis Yisrael. He was the Ger Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael. Then after him was the Leif Simcha. And the Pnei Menachem was a young boy from Pacific Sheni. Imrei Emes had two wives. And the Pnei Menachem was his youngest son, who was born from a second wife. So his mother had a child from a previous marriage. And that child was older than him. It was his half-brother in a sense, because he had the same mother, not the same father. Last name was Temkin. And his name was labeled Temkin. He was killed up, Kiddush Hashem. And there was a question of him going to the army or not. And his mother, he remembers that his mother, the mother of him and the mother of his half brother, Reb Leib Temkin, came into the Rebbe crying her heart out. And he says, Rebbe, Davin, we got Davin. Is he going to get exempted from the army? They was afraid. It was that time. It was World War I. Afraid, what's going to be? Is he going to be able to get out of the army? He said, Hashem Yazar. He was parav also in the answer. And he said, Rebbe, tell me, you're my husband, is he going to be okay? He says, Hashem Yazar. So it was a little strange. He wouldn't give Haftarah. When you don't get a Haftarah from the Rebbe, you start getting nervous. So she went to her mother, who was the Imrei Emes's mother-in-law, right? The second mother-in-law. And she heard she was distraught. She hadn't gotten a bracha. And she goes into her son-in-law, the Imrei Emes, the husband of his second wife, whose child from the first marriage didn't get a Haftarah that he would survive the draft and he wouldn't be drafted. And she says, my daughter is in terrible pain. He says, why don't you, be mafteacha? I mean, is he really not assured? So he says, don't worry. He says, don't worry, he won't be taken to the army. So he says to them, why are you giving her such a hard time? So he said, because if she doesn't know, she's going to keep crying. She's going to keep davening for him. You don't just need to be exempt from the tzava. You need a mother to cry for you your entire life in this world and beyond. Racham avak al b'neha. He didn't want, he said, in the words he said, Amama davenin. I wish there were more women here and you could share it to the women. Amama davenin. Amama davenin. That's what the role of a mother is. And those tefillas, those personal tefillas, not tefillah b'tzibur. Not tefillah b'tzibur. Women don't daven b'tzibur either. But that intimate bond with Hashem, when you talk, meret ois the heart, as he say, that's malchus shav yisai. That's the malchus shav yisai. And that's what he told the father. He says, if I tell he's great, you say, oh, gavaldi, you boast and be happy. Like this, you're not so sure. You'll keep davening. I don't want you to get too comfortable. Keep davening for your children. The tefillah you daven for your children now and your entire life, and is what's. I'll repeat this again. It's another great story. It's a story that happened here in the shul. I once made a comment. It was a chassidish avart. You probably heard it from me, but not everyone heard it. I'm going to repeat it again. There's a joke that one of the nisim of Rosh Hashanah is that we say La Metzerach Ne'Kairach, and we don't say Kuf Yotes 7 times, before the. It's a joke. So one of the people in the shul said it over, and it was a whole shtickle Torah, a whole message. But whatever it is, that was the part. So he went home to his parents, and this kid, when he was young, gave his parents a little grief. And so he starts telling over the drush and this piece about, one of the Rebbe says, in the miracle, and we say that, not Kuf Yates 7 times. So the parents look at him and he says, what's the big deal? So you'll say it 7 times. He said, what are you talking about? 7 times Kuf Yates, how many psukim there are? So he said, I want to tell you something, young man. When you were a young boy and you started giving us trouble, me and your mother decided that we would say Kapitel Kuf Yates every day of our lives. And you want to know something? We still say it every day of our lives. Even though you're 20 years older and you have a wife and you have kids, we still daven for you every day. We know Kuf Yates by heart. And that's why he says, that's such a big deal. We've been doing it for 25 years or more. Every day we say Kuf Yates for you. My mind, it's amazing. Okay, I told him, if your parents are saying Kuf Yates you, I would expect to be a little better behavior than But anyway, I want to read you one more thing. This is amazing. I saw it today. I stumbled across it, and I got to share it with you. So Reb Shmuel Bloom, he used to be the head of the Agudas Yisrael. I knew him. I grew up. I mentioned his name a few times in my stories of life. And I remember he was much older than me. He must have been maybe 15, 20, maybe 20 years older than me, or maybe 15 or 20 years older than me. But he was like one of the big guys when I grew up in Crown Heights. Shmuel Bloom, his father and his mother were best friends with my parents and lived down the block from Etzion Brand or somewhere down on Crown Street. I think they lived. They lived on Crown and Schenectady, and I remember in the house. Anyway, Shmuel Bloom, so he had a lot. He was involved in a lot of community things his whole life. He was involved. He learned here in Israel, and he was I think a Reish Machin in Israel for many years. Anyway, so he said there was once a series of tragedies in Far Rockaway, and we all trying to figure out what do we do? What do we do? I mean, we have to correct our ways. So he said over the following. He said, you know what? I don't know. Everyone has different ideas. Let's all go. We'll go with a group of us, and we'll visit the Bluzhev Rebbe, who's still alive. The remarkable stories about the Bluzhev Rebbe, and we'll go to him and we'll discuss it with him, and we'll see what he says. So they come in, and the Rebbe comes in. He's an old man, and he hold him on both sides, and he sits down. And the representative of the group begins to relate the different tragedies that the community has befallen. They're trying to know what to do. So you see, the Rebbe is taking it very serious. And when they finished the list of all the tragedies, he said, we were thinking that maybe we should do, one of these following takanas. He said, maybe every morning, every member should give a kaif nefesh, like a kapara, 18 cents for tzedakah. Second person suggested we should make a takana not to speak during Chazar Sashatz. The third made another takana, he doesn't remember what. The Rebbe looked at them and he says, nah, it's not going to work. He says, 18 cents, too cheap. You talk about a serious situation, you think 18 cents can solve it? And he says, one said not to talk during Chazar Shatz. He says you're going to check and make sure no one talks. And worse, you're going to make a takana, and then they're going to be over the takana, and then there'll be more averis on the head. So he said, and the third suggestion also, he wrote off whatever it was. And at that point, there was an uncomfortable silence until one of the group representatives asked, Rebbe, what should we do? Again, silence. The Rebbe was deep in thought. Finally, he lifted his eyes skyward and said, we have a Tata in Himmel, a Father in heaven. When you beg from your Father, he responds. Upon hearing that, I said, Rebbe, does that mean we should gather all the members of the shul together and declare a Yom Tefillah? We'll make a Yom Tefillah. He looked at me with his sharp eyes and said, don't make a circus. Sit in your makan kavua, in shul or home if you're not yizaychet to go to a minyan, and talk to the Rabbi Shalom like you're talking to a tata, to your father. Pour out your heart to him and he will answer. That's the bottom line. Ma'achal Shevi said. Should learn from our mamas. It's not tefillah b'tzibah necessarily, because it helps. It's talking hearts to hearts. We pour our heart out to Hashem, to Eibishter, and we talk to him intimately. We've had the opportunity. We're going to lose it soon, because now we're going back to being with others. Obviously you can learn and there's a value to it, but we have to look at the positive we gain from it. I'm sure every single one of us had an elevation in tefillah, because we just thinking of the words of Shemona Esrei more often. It's just we sin. There's no rushing, and inevitably, and you say the Psuki de Zimran, the Kriya Shema, and everything that we're doing. I've never davened this good in my life. I'm really. I don't want to sound like God just keep us in gullus here, but again, it forced us into a situation that you talk to God intimately, and how many times you shed a tear in davening. If you're really talking to Hashem, you're talking to your Father. And you ever had a conversation with your parents in a difficult time and you cry? You got to cry. We learned that from our mothers. The Machal Shevi said, Rachli Meinu taught us. If we do that, Hashem will listen. I think that's one of the important messages we should learn. And it's Hashem. We will be zeicher that Hashem will listen to our tefillas and unmute us all.